Alpha Halo was humanity's first ever encounter with our ancestors' ancient, terrifying ringworlds. Delta Halo was where the Holy Covenant imploded and the first Gravemind in 100,000 years was formed. Zeta Halo, the most dark and ancient ring, was once home to horrors beyond our comprehension and is now the point in which the entire Halo universe is anchored. The Halo rings that we know of are some of the greatest sources of mystery in the entire Halo universe, but today we're going to investigate the mystery of the other Halo rings, the ones that are lost and forgotten. Where are they? What happened to them? Why are they missing? All of that and much more, including a little sprinkling of theorization thrown in as well. But before we do, a quick word from today's very iconic sponsor, Opera GX, the ultimate browser for gamers. If, like me, you keep your browser open whilst gaming, then the GX control features are going to be your best friend. Tweak them to limit the browser's RAM, network, and CPU usage to avoid any kind of lag in-game. I mean, just look at how much more resource efficient Opera GX is than Chrome when you use these features. But Opera GX's customization suite has gotta be its highlight for me. I've got my browser decked out in a fully custom Halo mod pack from the GX store, which converts my browser into pretty much an extension of the OG Halo 1 UI in every way, changing the background and its music, keyboard sounds, opening and closing tab sounds, custom splash screen, custom UI icons and GX icon, and even custom shaders. And each individual mod can easily be enabled and disabled in the mod menu on the sidebar as well. And further, Opera GX has integrated ChatGPT now as well. You can access it right from the sidebar and use it to brainstorm ideas or even learn languages. So make sure you download Opera GX today by using my link in the description. And thank you once again to Opera GX for sponsoring the video. So before we begin, I just want to give you all a quick reminder of how the Foreigners actually named the Halos, because this is actually a quite important detail that a lot of people don't actually realise. There is quite significant relevance behind the Halos' names. So, the rings were numbered in the order that they were built, and named alphabetically in the order in which they were fired. So, Installation 04, Alpha Halo, was the fourth ring to be built, and the first ring to fire at the end of the Foreigner Flood War. Pretty straightforward. And on that note, let's start out with the first Halo ring that was ever built, at least as a part of the newer array. Installation 01, Beta Halo. Of all the Halo rings, Beta Halo is the furthest Halo ring from the Ark, located in the Myung system in a distant region of the Orion Arm, where it orbits the mysterious gas giant of Auric. Its monitor is 01001 Shamed Instrument, and I guess this is the part where I should very quickly touch on the naming conventions of the monitors as well. So the numbers are pretty simple. The first number refers to the installation that they're created to maintain, so in this case 01, installation 01, and the second number, as far as we know, has no meaning. But the meaning behind their names, their actual worded names, is far darker. Upon creating the monitors at the end of the Foreigner Flood War, the Isodidact said the following: "You will be guardian and protector of an entire installation. You will be called 343 Guilty Spark. The others have received similar nomenclature, with escalating numeric delineation. Their new names are an omen, as well as an epitaph for our people, and for my wife. Were there another way, we would have taken it." So, the negative, almost ominous names of each Halo's monitor are meant to stand as both an omen and also an epitaph of the Foreigner's dark legacy that led to the creation of the very installations that these monitors now protect. As per the last transmission from Installation 01 to the Ark in 2552, the surface of Beta Halo is a pale, arid environment, its surface heavily cratered and seemingly devoid of all life, consisting of nothing but endless tracts of desert. Like some of the other mysterious rings we're going to be looking at today, the biodiversity of its surface differs rather starkly to Alpha Halo, Delta Halo, and Zeta Halo, featuring far less greenery and fewer oceans, with an overall lack of biodiversity in comparison. However, there are two schools of thought as to why this could be. The first believes that this is caused by custodial dereliction on the monitor's part, or that some key habitability systems on the ring failed, which caused extreme drought and ecological disaster. The other suggests that it could have been intentional design on the Forerunners builder's part. So given that Installation 01 was the first ring in the new Neoteric array, built to rather different specifications to the halos in the predecessor Senescent array, perhaps such a barren desert surface was an intentionally basic design choice so that the Forerunners could ensure that the important parts of the halo, as in its activation systems, its defense systems, etc., were fully functional first and foremost, because, at the end of the day, what good is a pretty Earth-like halo ring if it can't fire and stop the flood? Regardless of whether its unusual surface was the result of some sort of disaster, intentional design, or maybe even mysterious meddling, we do know that Beta Halo's firing mechanisms are fully intact. In both Halo 2, when the entire array was put into standby mode on Delta Halo, and also Hunters in the Dark when it was put on a firing cooldown, Installation 01 reported no system failures or irregularities of any kind. So, presuming that 01001's shamed instrument is still intact over there, he's at least kept the most important parts of Beta Halo in working condition. Installation 02, Epsilon Halo, was the second Halo to be built and the penultimate ring to fire at the end of the Forerunner Flood War. It was hidden away in the distant Zagolin system of the Norma Arm, anchored at the Lagrange point between the planet of Tafro and its moon Ind. Now, the Lagrange point essentially means that this ring is located in such a place that the gravitational forces and the orbital motion of Tafro and Ind balance each other out. It's monitored by none other than Contrite Witness, 02007 Contrite Witness, who in 2490 sent a status update of the installation to the Ark in which no abnormal activity was reported. However, the latest update on the ring in 2552 revealed that its habitable space had at some point seen severe climate change, resulting in the formation of significant glaciers that undoubtedly had a large impact on life on the installation. The latest look at Epsilon Halo showed its surface to be heavily ocean-based, with some rocky outcroppings and, of course, some also large glacial formations. And based on that, I have a theory. It's a crackpot theory, but a theory nonetheless about why this climate change may have occurred. Of course, there's a chance that it could have just occurred naturally, but significant flooding and ice formations are typically how a halo's weather systems respond to a flood outbreak. Ideal temperatures for the flood spread are warmer, and so by dropping temperatures, their spread can be slowed, and through strategic flooding, you can also deny the parasite access to certain key locations on the installation. We covered all of this in extreme detail in the last video, by the way, so if you haven't seen that one yet, then it'll be linked at the end of this video. I highly recommend you go and check it out because it's a really interesting deep dive into one of the more understated ways that the Forerunners contained the flood. And also, this kind of gets me thinking, slight tangent here, but I wonder if the reason that the stone Forerunner city that surrounded the library on Delta Halo was flooded was because the ring's automated systems kicked in when the quarantine zone was created and submerged those ruins to ensure that if the flood broke the Sentinel Wall, their spread would be slowed. I don't know, just some food for thought. But anyway, back to Epsilon Halo. Climate change on a halo ring so severe that it creates significant glacial formations and ensures that much of the surface of the ring is consumed by ocean sounds like a pretty textbook response to a flood outbreak to me. But by the sounds of it, 007 is in a much more competent state than 2401 Penitent Tangent was on Delta Halo, so I imagine that if there is an outbreak, at worst it's being kept at bay and at best it's contained. Still though, running with this assumption, for the entire ring's surface to undergo such radical changes implies to me that the outbreak must have been quite significant. Hopefully one day we get some clarification on this, and hell, maybe even a story about the Epsilon Halo outbreak. A guy can dream. Now, this Halo is kind of cheating because although we never went down to it in a game, it definitely isn't as unknown or mysterious as the other Halos, but it definitely still has some really interesting mysteries that I personally want to talk about, so I'm going to because it's my channel. Installation 03, or Gamma Halo. Gamma Halo was originally placed in the Caffrey system of the Scutum Centaurus arm, originally anchored to an unknown gas giant during the Forerunner Flood War. But at some point it was moved and anchored to a different planet instead, the planet of Dovin, for reasons unknown. Now, its monitor, 049 Abject Testament, is, or I guess was, a weird one. So after Installation 03 was anchored to Dovin, some mysterious and significant cataclysmic event occurred on the planet that quite literally shattered it down to its core, sending pieces of the planet so far into space that they became locked into Gamma Halo's orbit. What caused this almost apocalyptic event is entirely unknown. However, Abject Testament has not been seen nor heard from since. At some point, more than 20,000 years before we first found Gamma Halo, he ceased directing the ring's functions, and then when we arrived, we found 86,198 reports filed by the installation's submonitors detailing the poor state of quarantine controls and lack of action on outstanding maintenance and research requests. The likely explanation, of course, is that Abject Testament was simply lost or destroyed in the cataclysm on Dovin, but given his demeanour, there's a chance that he simply just abandoned his duties. So Testament was extremely ashamed of his creator's legacy, far more so than any of the other monitors, going as far as saying that his creators, the Foreigners, deserve to be forgotten. So perhaps his views on his creators inspired his abandonment of their greatest relics. Either way, whether he's an ashamed deserter or not, it's a miracle that in his dereliction, there was never a major flood outbreak on Gamma Halo, especially given how many reports there were about the poor state of quarantine controls. Damn, that would have made for such a cool story arc in Halo 4 had there been an outbreak whilst we were on Ivanov Station. God damn it. Beyond this mystery though, Gamma Halo was also home to the Composer, the Composer's Forge where they were created, and also the Composer's Abyss, which is where the tortured souls of those who were composed were stored. Following the Human Covenant War, humanity built Ivanov Station to conduct research on the ring, but of course the Didact's arrival kind of got in the way of all that. Gamma Halo was also the site of Chief's second fight with the Didact, which resulted in a significant portion of the ring containing the Composer's Forge being ejected, causing massive structural damage and requiring the former monitor of the Forge, 859 Static Carillon, to move the ring elsewhere in the galaxy for repairs. And so, the current location of Gamma Halo where these repairs are taking place is entirely unknown, and given that it wasn't present in the Ark's Foundry in 2559 in Halo Wars 2, we have no idea where it's gone. But don't worry, Oni made sure to secure its activation index for safekeeping should they need it. Anyway, back to the truly lost and forgotten Halo rings, let's take a look at Installation 06, Kappa Halo. The penultimate ring to both be built and fired, Kappa Halo has a rather uncertain history. The ring orbits the ice giant of Hakuth in the Umdorkan system of the Perseus Arm. Its monitor is 0616807 Abashed Eulogy, and nothing is known about him. I'm not even kidding, not a single fact or detail exists about this monitor besides the fact that he exists. Damn, he just like me for real. But the main point of contention with Installation 06 is its surface, which appears to change with every status update. So in the control room of the Ark in Halo 3, its surface looks very cratered and rocky, almost akin to the moon, but in the original 2009 Halo Encyclopedia, its description is quite contrary to both Halo 3 and even contrary to itself. It's said to have a, quote, tundra surface, but then in the next description, in the very same paragraph, says that it's a ring world, quote, covered in dense forest or jungle, similar to portions of Installation 04 and 05. Then, it even acknowledges how strange this is. Quote, however, no recordings of its surface indicate any major water sources, so how this environment maintains viability remains unknown. It also reaffirms that the only intel about Kappa Halo at this point was courtesy of the data that Chief gathered from the hologram on the Ark, which shows its surface as neither tundra nor dense forest and jungle. So already the details about Kappa Halo are pretty confusing, but matters were only complicated further by the new 2022 Halo Encyclopedia, which seems to actually canonize the contradictions. During humanity's time on the Ark, the cartographic data retrieved from a local communications array displayed Kappa Halo with a craterous and barren landscape stretching across the entirety of its surface. This data conflicts with other reports indicating that the ring's habitability systems are functioning at the same levels of other installations. And then it also states that, quote, though there is no clear indicator of compromise or interdiction from external forces, the monitor has yet to respond to inquiries. So what in the hell is actually going on over at Kappa Halo? An MIA monitor and totally inconsistent topology reports? Like, it just doesn't add up. I feel like something must have happened on Installation 06 that we haven't been made privy to just yet. Maybe, I don't know, a cataclysmic flood outbreak? A guy can dream. But don't worry, the oddities with 06 don't stop there. There's another one that isn't lore-based, but it's definitely worth touching on whilst we're talking about just weird contradictory stuff with Installation 06. So up until a few years ago, Installation 06 wasn't actually called Kappa Halo. In Halo 3's files, the texture for Installation 06's hologram was referred to as Gamma Halo, and the texture for Installation 03, which is now Gamma Halo, was called Eta Halo. Of course, in Halo 4 this was changed and Installation 03 was made Gamma Halo, but for half a decade following that, Installation 06's place in the firing line was entirely unknown until 2017, when it was finally given its designation as Kappa Halo. So, both in-universe and also production-wise, it seems that Kappa Halo, Installation 06, has an almost natural allure of mystery. But before the neoteric array of halos that we are most familiar with were created, there existed a predecessor array of vastly larger halo rings. 12 of these halos were created at the Greater Arc to form the senescent array, and of these 12 rings, there are only 2 that we know anything about. The first ring, or Gyre as they were referred to in this array, is, or was, Gyre 09, which is the only senescent ring to have an alphabetic designation, Omega Halo. But given that this array was never fired in unison like the neoteric array, I don't really have any idea what the meaning behind this alphabetic designation is, besides making the halo sound cool, because come on, Omega Halo? That sounds really cool. Maybe it's a reference to the Alpha and the Omega. Alpha Halo was the first Halo to be fired to end the Forerunner Flood War, and Omega Halo was the last senescent ring to be destroyed. It's a bit of a stretch, but it's the only real information that lines up. Just like the rest of the senescent array, Omega Halo was 30,000 kilometers in diameter instead of the normal 10,000 kilometers in diameter that we're used to with the neoteric halos. Not only was it literally 3 times bigger, but its main weapon fired a directed pulse as opposed to an omnidirectional pulse. Omega Halo, alongside all but one of its senescent brother installations, was present during the Flood's cataclysmic assault on the Forerunner capital of Mithrilion. The capital fell to the Parasite, and what remained of the Forerunner military hurriedly evacuated the remaining Halos under their control through a portal to the Greater Arc to regroup, but only Omega Halo made it through the portal intact, albeit still severely damaged. Omega Halo was then repaired and stationed at the Greater Arc, such that if the Flood arrived, its directional pulse would be fired directly into the Path Chthona galaxy from which they were coming, annihilating all life, infected and uninfected, within. As the Librarians' conserved specimens were moved to the Greater Arc, humans had to be moved and housed on Omega Halo to prevent overpopulation. But when the Flood arrived, this led to a rather horrific outcome. During the Infected's assault on the Greater Arc, the Didact went to Omega Halo and composed almost all of the humans housed there to create the Promethean Knights in a desperate attempt to counter the Flood's overwhelming superiority, an attempt that quickly proved futile. With the Greater Arc lost, what little Forerunner military forces still remained uninfected retreated one last time to the Lesser Arc, but the infected numbers in its orbit were so significant that they couldn't extract without some serious damage being done. So, a handful of notable Forerunners, including the Isodidact and Faber, the creator of the Halos, went to Omega Halo and fired the ring, annihilating a large number of Flood and also enough of the precursor Star Road structures that were blocking the way. However, not all of these Star Road structures were destroyed, and those that remained were used by the Flood to strike Omega Halo, tearing it apart and killing all within the control room besides the isodidact who was saved by Guilty Spark. The parasite then turned its attention to the greater arc and used the Star Rose to destroy that installation as well. So Omega Halo went down with both its creator facility and also its actual creator, while also marking the end of the senescent array. And you know, when you consider that Omega means the end, this all seems quite fitting. And secondly, we have Gyre 11, which is the only name that we know for it. This Gyre, or installation, would be the only ring in the senescent array to live beyond itself. Upon the creation of the Neoteric array, Gyre 11 was shrunk 2/3 in size to become the 7th and final halo of the new array. Gyre 11 became Zeta Halo. As for the rings, Gyre 01 through 08 and also Gyre 10, they were all destroyed during the Flood's assault on Mithrilian. Some were in possession of the Flood and Mendicant bias, and were destroyed by the Foreigners' defense fleet. Others were under control of the Foreigners and were sent through a retreat portal to the Greater Arc, but of course only Omega Halo survived that journey. The current lore surrounding the unnamed Gyre installations is spotty at best and frankly non-existent at worst, and there really isn't much speculation to be had about them, seeing as, you know, they were all destroyed at pretty much the same time. So for now, in the truest sense, they remain mysterious, lost, and forgotten. So, out of all the lost and forgotten Halo rings, which one do you want to go to in a game? And why? I gotta say, for me, it has to be Epsilon Halo. Not only is the name Epsilon Halo awesome, but I feel like there might be a rather dark explanation behind its strange case of climate change. Hopefully, one day we find out, and hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I want to give a huge thank you to all of my amazing patrons for the continued support over there as per usual, and thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I'll catch you all in the next one.